How's it going, everyone? In today's video we are going to be breaking down a track from Kolter and Luuk Van Dijk called Good For You. This tune is particularly interesting because it takes that minimal style we've covered on this channel and fuses it with those classic 90s house influences that we're also familiar with. I think this is just a really nice tune and there's loads of nice sounds to it, so without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing we've got is this a cappella. The vocal they've used is this one by a singer called Pamela Fernandez. It's a really nice sung a cappella type vocal, and I just think it works perfectly for that kind of euphoric, happy kind of 90s vibe that they were going for this track. So essentially my advice here would be to go down the a cappella sampling route, build out your own a cappella library, similar to how I showed in the first part of our vocal tutorial. If you want to kind of skip a few steps and just pick up a solid a cappella collection, then what I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description and I'll leave a discount as well. So that would be the source. And then essentially what they've done is they've chopped it up and manipulated it in different ways. So we start with these ad-lib phrases. Music. I like the music. Just these music snippets, basically just introducing the phrase. Then as we get onto it, I like the music pumping. I like to feel it in the soles of my feet. It makes me feel like running. So you basically just got different phrases, piece them together, and there's enough variety there. I think they've picked a really good vocal, which just has all these different really nice phrases that you can bring in and out at any one time. The next thing we have is these ad-libs.
The dance floor is now open.
You know there are two sides to every story.
I've talked about these ad-libs loads. The vocal tutorial I did pretty much covers most of this, but essentially it's about looking in wacky places and getting creative with your sampling.
You know there are two sides to every story.
The next group we'll talk about is this kind of low end group consisting of the kick and the bass. The kick we have is fairly standard. It's quite a fat, punchy kick sample if I just play it without processing. Just nice and crisp with a tiny bit of high end as well. Then we've beefed it up with drum bus, we've added some transients, we've used an EQ, taking away a few of the low mids just to make room for the bass. We've got this glue compressor, and then this is just for automation. Then we move on to the bass. This is kind of like the perfect bass in my opinion. That kind of fat analog bass, which has characteristics similar to the lately, but I think the sound is just a bit more rounded. What we've got here is two basic saw waves. The first one is down 2, the second one's down 1. We've then got this envelope where the sustain's been brought down ever so slightly and the decay looks like that, which is then mapped to that kind of classic filter, which is opening and closing. If we just go to the effects, we've then got a chain which is compressing it, adding a bit of distortion with a decent amount of drive. We've then got that chorus, we've got delay, which is giving it that extra groove. We've got this reverb, and then we've just got that kind of final EQ. When it comes to the pattern, it's more on the complex side of things. I think when you have such a nice sound, you can go either way, and most tend to opt for the simple, but here we've got a fairly complex pattern and we've also got a few different variations. So I'll play this pattern because I think it's the main one. We've not really gone overboard when it comes to the notes. As you'll see, the majority of it sits on that kind of root, basically just playing that root repeated and then bouncing up the scale. But then we've got the kind of addition of notes up an octave or down an octave. So that's kind of the main pattern, and then you've got this pattern variation going on where you've just got subtle tweaks to the pattern just to keep the track moving. I think this one's basically the same, with the only difference being at the start. We'll go for this one. And I think the only other one's this. If we're kind of analysing this pattern, what we've essentially got is this rhythmic sequence, basically alternating between the octave and then working up the scale here, some changes in notes for variety. The next group we're going to move on to is all these instruments. What we'll do is we'll start with the piano. There's loads of different keyboard sounds that you could choose, but I think for that kind of euphoric feel, the sound that I'd be prioritizing would be that kind of piano. When it comes to plugins, I have a few go-tos. The first one would be the rolling chord stuff. The dance tracks, the keyboards, the JV180 all have some nice old school piano sounds. The other one as well, which has some nice piano sounds, but I think you have to do more work to give them that kind of old school character, would be Arturia. So you've got stuff like the Piano V, the Stage, the Whirly. That would be my second suggestion. The other one would be the Korg M1, which has a lot of those classic sounds. So those would kind of be my go-tos for piano sounds. But what I've actually done here is experimented with one of the stock sounds from Ableton to see if I could shape it into something. So I'll play it without. You'll hear it kind of has a bit of potential, but it does need a lot of work at that point. So what I've done is started off with some EQ, basically doing some cleaning and then a bit of boosting to bring out the highs. Got a chorus, we've got a phaser, got an OTT to compress the highs and the mids a bit more. We've got a pretty large reverb. This is for automation. And then we've got a sidechain to duck the chords if I do a quick comparison. So that's pretty much the sound and how you'd get closer to that 90s character of piano. Another thing that's quite important with this is the chords themselves. The thing they've done quite differently here is they've not gone for the usual triad. I think they've experimented with moving the notes around. So we've got the E flat, got the G, we've got the B flat, which would be the 7th, and then instead of going for the C, what they've done is they've moved that C down to the 7th, and they've just completely omitted it here. I get the feeling, without overanalyzing this, that they've deviated a lot from those standard minor chords. It's always hard for me to tell you, like, specifically how to do chords. Just kind of get experimental. Start with those basic minor ones. Use the scale function to help you learn what notes go with what, and just experiment with moving one of the notes of the basic triad and just see what you can do. The next layer we have is these kind of synthy rave chords. The way I've done this is I've used this wave. What we've done is we've added a decent amount of unison to around 7. This unison effect basically just makes the sound larger. We've added a bit of noise. We've got the envelope looking like this. Then for the effects, we've basically got an extra chorus and we've got a bit of delay. The next sound we have follows a similar trend, but returning to the keyboard theme. I'll just show how I made this one. This one here, we used different waveforms. We've got that kind of plucky envelope yet again. A lot of these sounds are typically quite stabby. You could go in theory, and shape the actual envelope of the sound, but the way I'm doing it in this case is I'm actually using that envelope to control the opening of a filter. The next synth layer we have here is just this kind of like basic pad.
I know the feeling, baby, baby. I know what's good for you.
I'm not even gonna bother showing you the sound because you could literally take any pad sound and it would probably work. If we refer to the actual MIDI itself, they've kind of opted for one of those shorter patterns, literally 2 bars. I just inspect the chords. I don't think there's anything too fancy about them. Once again, a basic minor 7th with some notes moved up and down. The next sound we have is this resonant synth. You'll see the way this has been made is literally just using the default saw wave, and all you're really doing is having to play around with the filter. If you literally crank the resonance up and move the cutoff, you'll hear these really acidy tones. You don't even have to overthink sound design. Sometimes it can literally be a case of loading a basic wave and then just modifying the filter. So from this point, I'd say these are the main synthy layers. The rest of them to follow, I think, are ear candy and these kind of textures. We've got this RP sound. What it essentially is this sine-based ARP. If I just play. It's kind of like ambient atmospheric sound, and basically what they've done is they've done this 16th ARP pattern, which basically works down the scale. Got this glide synth, which I think is basically a pad going between 2 notes. If you want that kind of glide effect, the area to look is the voicings. They're around like legato and then alter the portamento time, so it glides between the notes. So we've got that, and then you've just got these standard strings. So that is going to be the instruments. The final layers we'll just quickly brush over are the rest of the drums. So we've got this clap. I think this clap was actually quite a long sample. You hear that kind of muddiness in the tail of it. What we've essentially done is tamed it down a bit just by altering the fade. We've got all these hats. This open one. Playing that kind of offbeat pattern, but you'll see in the second iteration we've basically got this double effect. Got this tambourine, the shaker, then we've just got these 3 tambourine loops adding their own kind of unique rhythm. Nothing too complicated there. The way we've kind of spiced it up, and the way I'd recommend spicing up any drum group, is with some kind of subtle percussion. We've got this bongo, basically playing on the offbeat, responding to this. Got this woodperk, clav, got this cowbell, essentially just pick really nice percussion sounds and play around with the rhythms, have a nice balance between those kind of constant ones and the more subtle ones. And then we've just got 2 loops basically doing that kind of filler roll I was talking about. And this one. This is kind of like a top loop. So yeah guys, that's going to conclude this one. I hope this breakdown has been useful for you and inspired you to go away and write those bangers. If you found this video useful, then I'd appreciate if you could leave it a like, hit subscribe and all that usual stuff. If you want to watch another video after this one, then I'll leave some recommendations that I think you might enjoy on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now